My name is Chris Mundell, and I use he, him pronouns. I serve as CCAD's Vice President for Institutional Engagement and Chair of the college's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, a group that aims to address structural inequity at CCAD and advance our equity and inclusion initiatives at the college. My role tonight is really simple. I get to introduce our panelists and our moderator who have generously agreed to share their time and their perspectives with us tonight. I'm actually really honored to be here and in their presence and then along with all of you, and I look forward to an engaging discussion. Before I get started with introductions, I'd like to take a moment to just express some gratitude. When I consider what has helped me to sustain my own mental health in the last 18 months, the practice of feeling and expressing gratitude has really been essential. So in that spirit, I'd like to recognize a few people who have helped to make this happen tonight, starting by recognizing CCAD's Counseling and Wellness Center, AKA the CWC. A micro grant that the CWC was awarded has helped to bring about tonight here. And I really want to say that the CWC, as we affectionately call it, is really a vital force for advancing inclusion and empathy on this campus. And I want to specifically recognize the CWC Director, Aaron Vlack, and Assistant Director, Michelle DeBellis, for their fierce commitment to the well-being and mental health of the creatives who study here at CCAD. Additionally, I'd like to thank Jen Schlieder, Christina Rawson, Tim Rietenbach, Cameron Granger for their help in bringing this panel together. And then last but not least, I'd like to thank Associate Professor and Department Chair of Writing, Philosophy, and Literature, Robert Bloss, for convening this critical conversation. So now to our panelist. I'll start with Lisa. Lisa Hayes is a clinical social worker based in Columbus, Ohio. Lisa graduated with a master's degree in social work from The Ohio State University. Her undergraduate education is in sociology and gender studies, and her academic and professional focus has always included special considerations for issues of gender identity, sexuality, race, and social representation. Lisa's clinical experiences include work with complex trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and other disorders. She deals with culturally specific trauma and identity issues, including LGBTQIA+ specific support needs and many other subjects. She has done a number of local and national trainings. She is currently employed by The Ohio State University and also maintains a part-time private practice. She's co-owner of the Ohio Institute for Trauma and Wellness and serves as director of the EMDR therapy training program for BIPOC clinicians with the Institute for Creative Mindfulness. That is a lot of incredible work. What I will say, whew, dang, I didn't even give all the letters after her name too. There's a lot of those, but. I will just say that I've had the privilege of being able to work with Lisa and actually work with her through supporting people in crisis, and there's no one better. So thank you for being here tonight. Dion Custer-Edwards is a writer, educator, and the Director of Learning and Public Practice at the Wexner Center for... I'm not doing it in the right order, so see, I'm getting all out of whack, so wait, Dion. Is a writer, educator, and director of learning and public practice at the Wexner Center for the Arts. Her work at the Wex has included pioneering several groundbreaking education programs, including Pages, an art and writing program serving hundreds of high school students a year from across Central Ohio. Embedded in her art and education practices is Dion's commitment to work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Dion has received awards and fellowships for her work in the arts, including a 12-month fellowship with Americans for the Arts, and in 2021, and a Greater Columbus Arts Council Arts Partnership Award. So thank you for being here, Dion. Bobby T. Luck is a visual artist and education activist who works in film, multimedia, collage, and installation. After relocating to Columbus from Philadelphia, he jump-started the Free School for Humans initiative and co-founded Mint Collective. He teaches collage and film theory workshops across the country, and his work focuses on decolonizing modern imagery in media and reimagining globalization in the self by breaking down diplomatic and emotional borders through collage. Thank you for being here, Bobby. Lastly, Our moderator this evening, Hanif Abdurraqib, is a poet, essayist, and cultural critic who was born and raised in Columbus, where he lives and works. They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, Abdurraqib's first collection of essays, was released in 2017 by $2 Radio, a nationally recognized small press based in Columbus, and was named a Book of the Year by BuzzFeed, Esquire, NPR, and many more. This year, CCAD chose the book as its first-year common read for the second consecutive year, which is the occasion for tonight's discussion. Abdurraqib is a recent winner of the 2021 MacArthur Fellowship. I'm sure you've heard that a few times in the last couple weeks, commonly referred to as the Genius Grant, and one of the most prestigious awards in the nation. His most recent book of prose, A Little Devil in America, Notes in Praise of Black Performance, has been shortlisted for the National Book Award. His writing has appeared in numerous publications, including Muzzle, Vinyl, Pen American, The Fader, Pitchfork, The New Yorker, and The New York Times. Recently named an editor-at-large at Tin House, Abdurraqib also curates the online playlist 68to05.com and has created the podcast Lost Notes 1980 and Small Joys. He is a graduate of Beechcroft High School. Before I turn things over to Hanif, I want to share a quick reminder that we will be recording tonight's panel as a resource for those who are unable to be here. However, we will not be recording our Q&A session at the end. So I will now figuratively pass the mic to Hanif to kick off today's dialogue.
I am going to turn slightly so I can see everyone. This is much, last week I was here, and I'm not complaining about the setup, lest people think I'm a diva, but last week I was here with Erica Thompson, and we were we were in this like small table in these high chairs, and it was great to be that close to Erica, but this is much more comfortable. And we're 6 feet apart, and that's great. I wanted to start by talking about artistic practice or practices of care, and I am reminded of something the poet Vivi Francis told me in 2015, which was that when entering into any work that an artist does, it's important to set your table. She meant this in a literal sense, meaning that, for writers, if you're entering into some difficult work, it is perhaps important to have something around you physically that reminds you of your full self, so that when you exit the work, you can find something touchable that reminds you that you are more than what you produce, or that the difficulty that you're enduring within the work, it's like a totem, like from that movie Inception, which I reference all the time, though I've only seen once many, many years ago. And so I'm wondering about each of your individual practices of care when engaging in the work of production, because I think so often two things happen. Hard, emotionally draining work is glamorized, and then what is produced from that is glamorized, but rarely does the artist who does the producing get to maybe answer for how they cared for themselves through that process. And so I'm wondering if that comes easy to all of you, or how you've honed that as you've worked through different modes of your artistic lives.
They've all looked at me as the person who is least likely to have a creative practice, but I'm happy to start. I think really, the older I've gotten, and I don't think I mean chronologically, I mean emotionally, right? I've worked pretty hard at deconstructing these messages I received growing up, that like pain is evidence of effort, and so I think in the work that I do, I deal in emotion and in pain and in joy. And so I think it's important to recognize that is work for me, and to be grounded in the spaces that hold me. I think it's been very helpful, and so I'm pretty unapologetic about the ways in which I take care of my space, in the way that I set up kind of visual cues for myself to remind myself that I'm in a world of people who are loved and who do survive and who feel different and better, because I think it can be quite difficult to really hold space with people who are suffering, and to do that with authenticity and not to get lost a bit in the larger suffering of the world. And so I think that's important to me, and I think I've gotten better and better about expressing my connection and affection for people who do ground me and who support me. And I hope I've gotten better at creating boundaries for folks who take and don't give. So that's mostly how I stay with it and try to stay authentic in that space.
I think that I have a really hard time with that in some ways because a lot of my art has to do specifically with me grieving things that I find about the way that I'm perceived in the world, or the way that my community is perceived in the world, whatever community the person is perceiving me in that moment, being an intersectional artist. But one of the ways I do that, and which I see is like definitely a problem with a lot of other artists, is like giving myself time to like grieve in between the moments when you're creating, because it really is a process for me in grieving, not only for when I'm making art specifically about my own experiences, but also about the experiences of my ancestors. And I think that if I was just pushing out at the rate that people would really want me to be pushing things out, I would be suffering, and I don't want to suffer, so I don't do it. And I think like having the time, and even like breaking up pieces into small bits, thinking about the pieces that I'm working on for years before I even act on them. When pieces get overwhelming for me, I don't get hard on myself about putting them aside and coming back to them when I do have more chronological age and more tools to work with it in a way that's safe for myself. And I see so many of my artist friends really just like not only running their bodies into the ground, but also their like spiritual bodies by putting out all of this work that's expected by us, by a lot of like white institutions as Black artists, to put our grief on display in such a way. And it is like a way that a lot of people work through their trauma, is by making art, but that shouldn't be like I don't think that our grieving should be labor in the way that America thinks is labor, rather than the way that it really is labor, which is like a birthing process.
I think that what I need often is light. I write by the light. I keep the curtains open in my house. I really let the light in as much as possible. I think there's something about being aware when the body is grieving or has sadness. I feel it in my cheeks. I feel the sadness. As a matter of fact, I probably have a low level of depression right now, and I feel it in my cheeks. And there's something about feeling and paying attention to what your body is doing in order to be able to, sometimes you don't know how to address it. Sometimes I just notice, right? You know, you might be in a mindfulness practice and they just say notice. There's something about noticing and not ignoring that I've found to be a really helpful, just a helpful sort of life. I don't know if I call it a skill or a tactic or something, but I find that making by the light, so when I'm writing, I really need the light. It just is essential, I think, to my practice. And it's interesting because I will write by the window even when it's getting dark, like the sun will be going down, and I'm just sitting with those last droplets of light in the sky, just trying to savor it, I think. And so I find that to be something that I can go towards and find often. And I just think noticing when the body is embodying pain or grief or sadness or any of the kinds of things that a body might hold. And it's interesting because there's this balance of being an artist. I'm both an artist and also work in the arts. And I don't know, those are two different things, and they collide often in really interesting ways. I don't know that I do my work as an artist. I show up as an artist every single day to do my work. But being inside of institutions is difficult and painful and brutal, all the things. And people are like, how do you do that work? How do you? And so maybe we'll discuss that later, right? Like, how does one sort of stay in an environment that is grueling? Art making is grueling in a different way. Being inside of institutions is quite an endeavor. I
love this idea about noticing. I mean, I'm someone who, well, I mean, I write about this enough, and we're all friends here, so, but like people that, I'm someone who's both clinically anxious and clinically depressed, right? And so, to notice what one's, at least for me, I guess, to notice what my body and mind are doing in reaction to anything often puts me at odds with the realities of the world, right? Like, for example, I've had quite the 3 weeks that I think some would think this is a celebratory happy time, but that was just like crushing for me. It was really hard to move through the world. And there's a level of awareness that comes with that, where the question is then, am I failing because I have yet to understand how to celebrate? Like, I don't know how to celebrate appropriately, because like everyone is happy and I don't want to get out of bed, you know? And so I'm wondering too about like practice as a, not just artistic practice, but living practice. And Lisa, I feel like you probably have something thoughtful to say about this maybe. As some of the artists I know, particularly Black artists or artists at any intersecting margin, struggle with that. Maybe not with anxiety and depression, but struggle with creating when the realities of the world don't align with what they're feeling in one direction or the other. And I'm wondering for everyone how to get into a practice that perhaps does not respond, that either responds eagerly and aggressively and generously to what the world is telling you, or to what you want to tell the world, which isn't always aligned, I think.
I think it's interesting, right? Because I think often, particularly for folks who feel a certain level of expectation, right? And there is something that is being consumed about the way in which you exist. I think there's this idea, right, that somehow that pain or that distress is evidence of failing at doing the thing. And I think if we could pull that apart a bit, that kind of pain or that distress or that lack of congruence that people feel about what should I feel versus what am I experiencing, that is the stuff of living, right? That it's not failing to, but it's demonstrating a different capacity to experience celebration, and that we've done something where we've made life very narrow for folks, and we've made experience very narrow. And I think often folks find themselves outside then of what is supposed to be happening, and I think particularly for marginalized folks, my experience in the world is often where those standards have been set up had nothing to do with us. And so it's really difficult to compare that about what ought I be doing or what ought I not be doing. And I think sometimes just holding space for that realization, right, that these spaces don't hold us. And then asking ourselves, is this one of the ways that people can respond to celebration or energy or, you know, congratulations or whatever things people think you ought to be responding to in a particular way, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know for y'all how that feels, but I think it can get very small, the spaces that we're pushed into.
I mean, Hanif, we're actually just talking about this earlier, because I had like a show this week, so there was like a lot of people in my face telling me what they thought about me or what they thought about my work, which is nice, but like it's also a little stressful. And then I came back, and then it's my birthday week, so then everybody's just been really saying things at me. Don't say anything at me. But I also,
like, please don't.
but I also do agree with you with that feeling like you have to celebrate in a very specific way, but also like culturally, all cultures celebrate things so differently, and there's just like such different ways that people are allowed to like exist on the planet. Like how you were talking about. I think that for me, being able to like cope with the way that people are perceiving me versus how I perceive myself is first me asking like, what's so wrong about the way they're perceiving me? Like why am I feeling like there's such a disconnect, and is there actually a disconnect? And if there is, like what ways can I celebrate what I've gone through that won't make me feel like there's a disconnect? Like what things am I happy about? So like, so say somebody thought I should be really excited about having some sort of opportunity given to me, but I feel like I'm not up for the challenge and I really want to be able to like get myself in the mindset that I am, then I have to like be like, okay, well, you should be glad that people expect this much from you, but also you can give exactly what you can give. And I think like just remembering that coming to spaces authentically just means showing up. That's really helpful. Like any way I'm gonna be in a space is gonna be my authentic version of myself. because I'm not, like, if I'm doing me, I'm doing me. I think that it's really helpful to stay grounded by staying like alone a lot and thinking about who you are by being with yourself and knowing yourself and just spending time with yourself. And then I feel like a lot of the pressure of other people gets like a lot smaller when you already have the pressure of yourself taking up your whole mind.
A lot of what you both said, and you too, Hanif, really resonate with me. I feel like Lucille Clifton is here. You know, it's right, like this idea of sort of celebrating in this way that we are still breathing, like the breath is still here. It's noticing, again, the breath is here, and not in a superficial way, but in a literal way. We are still here. There's a lot of people that are not. I think there seems to me to be a range of gratitude, and how I don't know that I'm interested in, you know, it's interesting, this idea of perception that you both spoke about. I think that I get that a lot too. People think that they know things about me. People think that they're reading me. People think that they, you know, and I'm just like, oh, there's just so much you don't know, and so much that I'm grappling with. And it's fine. I think that's fine, right? I think that there's this range of being in the world that the world doesn't always allow you to sort of have a range. Like, what does it mean to celebrate, right? What does it mean to have a kind of range of gratitude that doesn't require an amount of like physical labor on behalf of someone else, right? What does gratitude look like when we are sort of holding onto it ourselves, and when we are when we are responding in whatever way, whether we're grateful or whether we're celebrating or whatever the mood is, for ourselves, for whatever it is that's happening in our life, and not on behalf of someone else. I do think it's exhausting to be operating in the world, performing for everyone else. And I don't know, the older I get, the less interested I am in it.
2 years ago, I talked to a Black writer who had pivoted from writing fiction to nonfiction, and my question was like, why, you know? And he said, because I was tired of people looking to me for answers. I was tired of feeling responsible for a great many of things, none of them being my responsibility. And when working on A Little Devil in America, particularly, like, I felt freed. I've always felt freed to write in the way I write, as Zora Neale Hurston did, and though it must be said she was punished a great deal for those pursuits. But when I finished Little Devil in America, there's this piece in there about spades that if you were at the library last week, I read it. And when an excerpt came time to run an excerpt from the book in like some paper, you know, I had Black editors work with me on the book, but there's a white editor at the paper, and we ran the spades excerpt, and he was like, well, this piece doesn't explain how to play spades. And so can we put like a line in there about how to, and I was like, no. You know, like, the purpose, like, the ideal life of that piece makes it so that anyone who knows how to play spades doesn't need it explained to them in that format. You learn spades by sitting at a table and losing a few times, maybe. And so this is all to say and I will say that, like, working on this book in particular, I felt a level of freedom that I hadn't felt, or I felt a new level of freedom that had come with perhaps aging my way into caring less about explanation or about offering a response to a world that expected something different from me, particularly, you know, and this is all love to like the artists who painted murals in the wake of last summer and all these things. But I am also wondering, how do you all achieve the freedom of not responding to a broader nation that expects a certain type of presentation from your work, and instead offers something that is pleasurable for you to pursue, or just exciting for you to pursue, or doesn't really need to answer for the messes that none of us are individually responsible for?
I have this thing that I've done for many years now to center myself when I find that it just keeps me grounded, and I just continue to ask myself why. Why am I doing this? What am I doing here? Why am I spending this time? Why do I care so much about this thing? What do I care about? And I don't know that we spend enough time really sitting with what do we care about, and how is that evidenced in the way that we live our life? And how is that care manifesting in every word that comes out of our mouth, every action that our body is doing, whatever our bodies are doing, whatever our minds are doing? And I just don't know that we think enough about that. Like, how are we sort of living in a kind of, I don't know, how do we care for ourselves? How do we care for the environment? How do we care, and what do we care about? And so I identified a few things, key things, it's 3 things that I continue to hold that I care deeply about. Art, education, and community are my 3 things. And if I've ever worked with you as a young person, you've heard this before, because I always ask young folks, well, what do you care about? Also, how do you know? How do you know? Not how I know, but how do you know you care about that? And then when you feel a little lost or a little unsure, or just, do you go back to those things that you care about to remind you what you're doing here? I find that has been a sort of a great guiding tool for me, is to return back to things. Because when someone's like, well, you should be doing this, or you should be thinking about this, or why aren't you doing this? And I'm just like, because I might not say this to them, I don't care about that, but but I might say to myself, you know the things you care about, you know why you're here, don't forget that.
I think I definitely have a lot of moments where something happens and I'm experiencing it really heavy, and there's no way I'm gonna make art about it. I need a lot of space between my experiences and my creations to make them as clear of a communication as I want them to be, and give myself as much personal privacy about my emotions on things as I need, and as much like closure as I need. Because like how I said before, a lot of my pieces really are, there's like a little bit of grief in them. So for me to like experience like Black Death on social media and then just like put down my phone and like create something about it, that's not really what I'm about. And I don't think that's what I don't think that's how most people cope with things. I think that there's a lot of people that are really good at doing that, and I just know that I'm not that person. If somebody expected that from me, then they wouldn't know anything about my craft or about who I am as a person. I'm for sure an overthinker. Everybody already knows that. And so like for someone to ask me or to expect me to have like a lot to say on something that I haven't already said a lot on, it just doesn't really make much sense. And like how you said, there's things that you really do care about. And sometimes I really think like, I'm not saying like everybody has to stay in their lane, because you never know when you're gonna come across a lane that's also yours. But like, if I spread myself too thin, then nothing's gonna be as strong as it would if I was really tackling the things that are the most important to me. When it comes to like media, the way that I experience media and the way that the people around me experience media is really important to me. Like, media literacy in children is one of the things that I really care about, and I've always cared about that because I myself was a child that didn't have very good media literacy. So when I see the way things happen on social media, and how fast things move and how little time we have to actually grieve over the things that do happen that they want us to say the most about, that makes me really nervous. And it's something that I care about a lot, and it's something that's like really deeply embedded into my art practice. So I think that having fast reactions to stuff like that would be really harmful for my mental health, and also possibly harmful to the people who are also experiencing grief alongside of me.
Something so meaningful, I'm just like trying to hold it for a second. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot recently, I think I've been trying to figure out like my relationship to power. And I think where power shows up in my life and encourages me to like equivocate, do you know what I mean? And to not know what it is that I care about, right? And to figure that out and what that looks like and how much of that serves me versus how much of that I've been encouraged to believe serves my larger survival, right? Like, does it actually serve me, or did someone tell me that's the way for me to continue doing the work that I want to do? And I think power can be like that, do you know what I mean? And so I think sometimes what I'm trying to do these days is just to take things out of the center that I don't think belong there. And I think a lot of like this work I'm recently doing where I'm providing training specifically for BIPOC folks in a BIPOC space, you know, I find that a lot of folks have opinions about that, and they'd like those opinions to be centered in the work that I'm doing. And so some of what I'm doing these days is just not inviting folks, right, not inviting that power to the center of my energy, because it doesn't concern you, right? It doesn't concern that person, and like trying to figure out how I can do that unapologetically and just to say like, hey, I'm not actually interested in having that relationship with your power where it takes something from me and creates a shift in my energy that disproportionately I'm left with then to manage, do you know? Yeah. And so I think I'm thinking a lot these days about why, like to what end? Why am I responding to this email? Why would I do that? That's not my focus. Like that's not centered for me. And I think there's something that feels kind of radical to me about that, having been raised in an environment that really wanted me to attend to power all the time. So
I got to get better at the why am I responding to this email? Like asking myself that, and then people really be emailing. There's no better. I wish I had a more eloquent way to put that shit, but he'll be emailing on some shit like, I know you're busy and immensely overwhelmed, but it's like, I gotta drag that to the trash. I know you just tweeted about being literally underwater and trying to swim the shore, but I want to talk a bit about young people and making blueprints for young folks. Like Bobby talked about media literacy, which I thought was important because as someone who has like edited young writers who are trying to respond really rapidly to a moment at the expense of not only themselves, but like, you know, presenting something thoughtful, I also consider that. But broadly, when I was young, in struggling with what I would later come to learn as mental health issues, I didn't have a blueprint to talk about it. I mean, I didn't have really a blueprint to understand what was happening. I was very much someone who just thought, well, everyone is enduring what I'm enduring, and I feel weird sometimes, or I feel not good sometimes, but like everyone feels not good sometimes. Or there's a difference between being like, I'm anxious about this test, and I'm anxious all the time. And now I think there's such a heightened awareness in the young folks I work with, and Deanna, I know you work with, and all of us work with. There's such a heightened awareness of what so many of them are feeling and their ability to articulate that, which I applaud. And I also find myself as someone who works with young folks wanting to give them all the answers at once, though I'm not capable of that. I think it's just like a corrective, right? Where I find myself being like, well, when I was young, no one was in a position to give me any answers, so I'm just gonna find all the answers I have and thrust them upon you at once, which is obviously not the move. But I'm wondering how all of you are maneuvering your work with young folks, if you do. Deanna, Amanda, you've committed like a lot of your life, energy, and time to working with young people. And so maybe it'd be good to kick off with you and talk about how that has evolved, like how your work with young folks has evolved, and if there's some kind of collaborative work in saying, you know, these are things I'm struggling with, these are the things you're struggling with, how can we together find a language for moving through it?
I love that. I have made an entire life on being with young people in ways that surprise even me, really intimate ways and profound ways, and young people have said things to me that I don't even know what to do with. Young people have put into words things that are big and poignant and terrible sometimes. I find that I have a hard time saying no to young people, so I'm often yes. I just am yes. They're like, can we meet for a studio visit? Yeah, I've got like 30 minutes. Or can you, you know, take a look at this thing. I can read one thing, right? Or being present in some ways. I don't know that there are the answers, but I know that being present has meant something over all these years. It's funny because over the years, you know, these young folks grow up and you're like, oh my gosh, like now you're, you know, and in some ways it feels so reciprocal, right? Like that presence, you think, oh, I'm gonna sit here with someone who is sort of coming into their own and coming into their life and making decisions about whatever they're making, Sometimes it's about their work, and sometimes it's about these other things that sometimes feed into the work and sometimes not so much. I find that just having that presence and being authentic is a practice in some ways. It's a part of my practice. I find that saying yes in some ways, and I know we have to manage that, and we have to have boundaries, and we have to have these things, but I don't regret saying yes over the years to so many young people that I've just been present with for sort of really small moments to look at things that are difficult, maybe in an art gallery, and look at sort of really difficult work and process that a little bit. Because I find that there's just so few spaces that we are allowed to feel things. If you think about it, where do you go to feel stuff? Right? Like, where's the space to feel things? Like, are there safe spaces that you have where you can really feel things? And in some ways, I've had so many amazing, humbling experiences with young people where they've just felt a thing, and I've just witnessed that. And just being present, not having a judgment, not having any advice, not having the answers, not having so many more questions, but just having that kind of presence, I think it's been really powerful. I hope for the folks that I've had those experiences with, but it's definitely been for me, walking away from those experiences and seeing that, whether it's transformative or whether someone has just realized something or sitting with something or just us holding space together. So I don't know if that might have been a non-answer, but just experiential.
That's the best answer.
Yeah, I think just hearing you talk about it, right? Like the work that I do is just full of all of this emotional generosity, you know, and I think often when I work with folks who are younger, who haven't been kind of trained to contain or conceal, you know, there's a level of vulnerability that is such a gift, and I think some of maybe what you're saying, right, is like if I can get the things that I don't care about out of the way, then I can probably say yes more often to those spaces. Can I mirror that? Can I be vulnerable? Can I tolerate like you seeing me in the world? And I think if we're not able to model that, then we're kind of asking folks in our lives to do something that they can't see, and that's often why I find that young folks aren't as sure how to do it, you know, because they're not seeing it very often. And I think, you know, in my position, folks are coming into a mental health space, you know, kind of like wondering how they fit in it. And I think, you know, one of my jobs is to just kind of like hold some space for the reality that like mental health and medical care in general is not oppressive by coincidence. Like it's oppressive by design. And so how can we be in these systems, and how can we insist on our presence in these places but still hold it accountable? And I think in doing that, it's like, can we hold ourselves accountable first? And can I say like, hey, here's the complexity of what we're doing, and you don't have to feel one way about anything. I certainly don't feel one way about anything, and like inviting complexity and inviting, maybe, I don't know what the opposite of a solution is, right? Maybe just space. Like, can I just hold this space where you're being really generous with me and saying, hey, I'm afraid of a thing, or I'm aware of a thing, and then I'm not constantly trying to correct it to fit into another direction, right? Does it have to always move somewhere? I think is often what young folks have given me as a gift about just showing up, just being uncomfortable for as long as it takes.
Yeah, I think that there's like not really a lot of opportunity for young folks in the world to like to create something that's in the world, like because they're always being told about what the world is by what they see, and then like how you said before, and then they don't get any say on what they're seeing. so then they don't really have any way to like play with their understanding of what they're witnessing. That's why I think it's like really important to like allow space for like artistic play, because of how therapeutic art actually is for the act of like having a voice to express yourself without like hitting those like ways of communication that have already been like kind of dismissed from you. So like nobody's coming behind you when you're drawing a picture and telling you that's not how you're supposed to speak. Not like, maybe in art class. But I just like specifically mean like that if we're talking about media literacy, because there's just like so much media that young folks are intaking. The reason why I like collage so much is because you could take all of these ideas and symbols and pictures that you've seen over and over and over again in your life and replace them to like more match how you see the world rather than what people are telling you to see. And I think that like being able to think about things in a more complex way like that and be able to like make your own story with like the images that are being fed to you all the time is a really therapeutic way for children to play. There's been a lot of times when I'm doing collage with people and they're like telling a story, and I think that that's a really important thing for kids to be able to do, is like tell stories that they know are just for them and that they don't really say too much about themselves, so they're safe stories to say, because it's like little codes and like little things that they're just saying to themselves, and it's like little play that they have just in their own mind. And it's nice to be able to like give people the space to just make associations with things and not have to explain themselves, because there's just like not really a lot of places in the world, like how you said, there's not a lot of safe spaces for them to like be experimental, or to be experimental specifically with how they're feeling about things. So I think I've been really blessed to be able to do a lot of like collage workshops and stuff with kids and like see them like telling me their stories just by like taking pictures out of like magazines and ads and stuff and like making them look the way that they want them to look.
Love that. Before turning over to the audience, I wanted to ask a question about the capital P power of art, but a very nuanced question maybe, which is, how do all of you balance, this is something I have struggled with in my life, how do you all balance the reality of art as a supplement to healing, or the potential of art as a supplement to healing, but not a substitute for healing? What's up? Yeah, not as a substitute for healing. Which I think, you know, for me, because writing has felt therapeutic for me in the past, I have used it as a stand-in for anything that is actually closer to therapy, if not therapy itself, right? So it feels like a line that I've learned to walk as I've gotten older. But I'm wondering how you all have walked that line through your many emotional years and chronological years.
I will say that art's definitely a language that you use. It's like a tool that you can use to like communicate with people. And as any language is, you can like lie with it. You can just lie. And so if you're like not being honest with like where you're at and like what you're going through in your art, then it's not gonna help you. Like it's not gonna be therapeutic. It's just gonna be enabling yourself. That's all I really have to say about that.
I love, yo. I'm ready to hear from everyone else, but the reality of art could just be like lies. I love it, because that's facts. It's, yeah, I don't know, but I'm eager to hear from everyone else.
I feel like that's the complete answer.
I know. I don't know if
It's one thing to like lie in your work, but it's another thing that the whole work is just a lie. Yeah.